Rain? What rain? We have no rain. This is Rochester Today. I'm Tracy McCray, along with Andy Brownell, making his way into the studio. And Dr. Mike Joyner is here once again. Good morning, Dr. Joyner.
Hi, Tracy. How are you? It's good to hear Stan Getz, and we can think back to the girl from Ipanema and the World Cup soccer and the Olympics coming up in Brazil here in a couple of years.
Your eyes kind of lit up when I played this. I surprise you with this song?
Yeah, you don't expect Stan Getz September on a rainy day. And,
I like the girl from Ipanema just for a little pick-me-up when I need it.
Yeah, well, I like Stan Getz, period.
That's true. Andy, how are you doing?
Good, Tracy.
I haven't seen you for a while.
Disorganized, but good.
That's all right. We're happy to have you here. Now, Dr. Mike Joyner has joined us before. I met him during Mayo Clinic Radio, but you also, in addition to working across the street over there, have a Human Limits blog and always have something to say about health and wellness and sports. And you came in and said, what are we going to talk about? And I said, what do you think? And I've got about 6 things here that we just rattled off. But one of the things that a couple segments down on your Human Limits blog is the shrinking middle class of physical activity. And I need you to explain what that means.
So if you look at it, Tracy, there's been a bunch of statistics come out really in the last couple of months, but over the last couple of years as well, showing who is meeting the physical activity guidelines. And so in general...
Because they are what, 30 minutes a day?
30 minutes a day of moderately vigorous physical activity. That means you're breathing, kind of breaking a sweat. 5 times a week, so 150 minutes a week.
So it's more cardiovascular than strength?
Right.
Okay.
And also there has been addition in the last 5 or 10 years of doing some strengthening or resistance training to avoid frailty and things like osteoporosis as you get older. Right. So if you look at it, there's really kind of a stair step. So individuals who are well-educated, higher socioeconomic status, typically about 60 or 70% of those people are meeting the guidelines for aerobic physical activity, and maybe 30-40% are meeting the guidelines for strengthening. If you kind of go down the ladder and look at the average person in the middle class, lower middle class, and even people that are in poverty, you get progressively fewer people really doing anything. And you wonder if that's changed, and it has. So in about 20 years ago, 50% of people were getting some sort of physical activity, and only about 10 or 20% of people were getting literally no physical activity. And that's really gone up. So in the last couple of months, there's been a bunch of reports out showing that 50% of Americans get no physical activity, whether it's occupational physical activity or leisure time physical activity.
50%?
52%.
Yeah, 52, and it's different men and women. Now, Andy, that's for 2 reasons. One is...
I'm looking at the women's
exactly.
factors.
I'm just shaking my head. How could that be?
Well, Andy, about, I always use the example of mailmen. We all here remember when mailmen walked their routes. Mm-hmm. So in 1960, about 50% of people got some physical activity in their job, moderate physical activity, and 20 or 30% got some. That's really, really changed. And then the number of people doing anything in terms of recreational physical activity has changed. So you wonder if physical activity and following the guidelines is really becoming the purview of either upper middle class or well-off people because they have the time, the autonomy, and other things to participate. So you wonder if people are just getting more and more squeezed, 2 parents working, more and more economic pressure on people. A lot of us live in parts of the country, people live in suburbs and so forth that are very physical activity unfriendly.
Well, I was going to say a lot of our daily life is designed to make it easier for us to be lazy.
To be in a car in drive-in windows, clickers, everything.
Parking lots. People just go crazy for parking lots, and you've got to be able to get a close space.
You spend 10 minutes getting closer.
But you brought up families with kids, and it wasn't that long ago that I had the young ones, and that was anything but relaxing.
Yeah, right.
And there was a lot of physical activity when they were young, chasing them around. So
you wonder how much screen time has changed because the other thing is, and I've got some graphs in the blog showing. One of the earlier ones showing that screen time really started to take off in about 1980. Now, we're all old enough to remember the world before everybody having a computer, everybody having a cell phone, everybody having some sort of tablet.
You mean the good old days?
Yeah, exactly. and everything comes with unintended consequences. And certainly screen time per se is associated with with obesity, if you look at people who either don't get fat or people who lose a lot of weight and keep it off, typically their TV watching is like less than 10 hours a week. And so, and you think about what I do all day, what you guys do all day. I spend a lot of time in front of a TV, computer screen. Writing grants, reading papers, doing my research. And even when we're doing clinical care now, it's so much of it is screen-based.
Right.
I'm looking at 10 hours a week, though. That's still a considerable amount of TV.
It is a considerable amount of TV. So people, because it turns out they've studied kids, too. Kids get kind of a trance-like state, and their metabolism goes down while they're watching TV. Plus, they're eating various things, chips and other
Not
things.
As healthy.
Yeah,
okay, so
healthy.
What are some of the things that you can do? Because for me, it was 2
Right.
years ago that we went on our Washington, D.C., New York trip. And Washington, D.C., of course, because that's set up as a tourist thing. But when we were in New York, the kids figured out what the daily life of a New Yorker involves. You getting yourself everywhere you need to go, and so much walking that you do.
Right.
And so from that moment on, I said, when we were out there, I said, we're never going to the closest parking spot again. So we will drive past the closest parking lot at Target and go off to the side. We don't do it every single time, but more often than not, because I want my kids to get the idea in their head. Build some exercise into your day.
Well, I think that's it. You got to build physical activity into your daily routine. So I think in addition to doing some sort of structured, go to the gym, go for a walk the dog, do whatever, people need to take opportunities to go up the stairs,
Take the long way.
Take the long way. Go for a stroll. One of the things we do out at St. Mary's, because of the great work that Dr. Jim Levine has done, is we've got some areas there where people have some long hallways where there isn't a lot of patient activity, where people are doing kind of walking meetings. And that's been helpful. I think a lot of people at St. Mary's take advantage of that. When the weather's good, you see people walking between St. Mary's and downtown. But I think that's the key thing. So in addition, Tracy, to again doing structured exercise, I think people just have to try to build little pieces of physical activity into their day all the time.
I'm not going to take all 9 floors of the Center Place building downtown, but I do get off sometimes on the 8th floor and walk up to the 9th.
Yeah, or take 2 or 3 flights of stairs. And I think the other thing, too, is the other big news is the whole sitting phenomena. So even people who are pretty diligent about their exercise, if they go in and sit all day, some of the positive gains associated with that exercise are sort of erased.
Yeah, sitting's the new smoking.
Yeah, sitting's the new smoking, and the thing that happens with the sitting is especially problematic for individuals that have diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. Even if they're doing a great job with their exercise training, if those individuals go sit all day, those benefits are wiped out even more in those folks than just otherwise healthy people.
So stand up when you're on the phone. Stand up during the commercials. I know that's
Move
a big
around.
thing. Yeah.
Right. I remember hearing Herschel Walker used to do push-ups during the advertisements, during the commercials when he was watching TV. And he would do several thousand a day. So I don't think we have to do several thousand.
Maybe 10.
But, 10 at a time
10
might work.
be all right.
Exactly.
Dr. Mike Joyner is here. It's 10:19. We're going to take a quick break, and we will return. We're talking about different physical activity, different fitness, different, we have to talk about cycling. So we'll talk about Mr. Voigt. We got all kinds of things coming up. KROC-AM.
1340 KROC-AM.
For Truckin' America, the authorized snow removal equipment supplier of Hinneker and Boss plows and salt spreaders. Be prepared for winter. It's inevitable. Truckin' America in Rochester and truckinamerica.com. The automotive aftermarket experts. I'm sorry to break that to you, Andy, but it's true. Isolated showers
inevitable.
today, cloudy and 67. Tonight, a chance of scattered showers early and 57. Tomorrow, partly sunny and 75. Friday, partly cloudy, 77. Saturday, sunny, 79. Sunday and Monday, partly cloudy and highs in the mid-70s. It's 60 degrees and cloudy with a little drizzle. KROC-AM. This is Rochester Today. Tracy McCray and Andy Brownell and Dr. Mike Joyner is here. We're talking about some different topics from the Human Limits blog.
And I will say this, though. When the snow does get here, I really do appreciate snowplows that work well.
Yeah, that's right. That is true.
Well, Tracy, if your driveway isn't too big and you're a little ambitious, you can still shovel.
That's right.
And I've avoided the temptation over 27 years to get a snowblower.
Yeah, I am so good at finding ways to skip my exercise, so I have to, in order to ease my conscience, I take some stairs, I park farther away, I go out and I shovel the side, whatever. And then I can go, yeah, it's okay that I didn't go in and exercise.
Free weight workout.
That's right. All right, as Andy cracked open his Diet Mountain Dew, we have to talk about diet soda as well.
You're going to guilt me?
Let's talk about diet soda, because just recently there was a new article. Was it last week an article came out talking about the latest report, or what was that?
Well, and basically they took some animal models, fed the animals some sort of artificial sweetener, so it wasn't exactly diet soda, and showed that the microbiome, or the bacteria in the guts of these animals, changed dramatically in ways that might actually make them eat more or actually promote obesity. Because the big new idea is that the bacteria in your gut interacts with all sorts of things, the so-called microbiome, and can play a role in your health, and can play a role in things like obesity, appetite control, and so forth. So the argument is that eating these artificial sweeteners did something to the microbiome and stimulated more food consumption and so forth in the rats. Now, these studies haven't been done in humans, yada, 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 but there's been a long, long controversy, Tracy and Andy, about whether diet soda actually promotes weight loss, is neutral, and people make it up some other way, or in fact kind of fakes the body out. And as Tracy said before we started talking about this, you've tasted something sweet, now the body wonders where's the sugar.
Where's the sugar?
And so you actually
crave
eat more.
The sugar.
Yeah, so
is that true? I have heard that before in different research studies and stuff.
And some of this is dependent on experimental design. A lot of these are short-term studies where people look, over consumption over days or weeks. And so it's a controversial issue, but it's not certain that diet soda promotes weight loss in everybody.
I would, we've talked about this before, and I have absolutely no sugar cravings at all. In fact, I don't.
Not your deal.
No. If anything, I have a problem with salty
Salt
things.
Guy.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing I think people are recognizing is there's probably some individual variability here.
Sure.
Is some people are more sensitive to certain food components than others, certainly with like salt and hypertension. There are people that are very, very, their blood pressure is very, very sensitive to salt. Other people can eat a lot of salt and they have normal blood pressure. And the same is true when you put people on low salt diets. Some people's blood pressure falls and some people doesn't change much in others. So I think that's one of the things that people have to recognize when you read these studies. Typically they're reporting sort of population-wide results in 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, and they don't tell you about the individual variability. And in a lot of these studies, some people really respond a lot, some people respond about the average, and some people don't respond much at all.
And isn't that what it's all about with your blog and everything else, is that if you have the knowledge, then you can make decisions.
Try to make some decisions, and I think that's. But I think the other thing that we're finding, or people are learning, Andy, is there's something called decision fatigue, and it's really the idea is you only have so much willpower in a day, and if you spend it on, you can only spend so much of it, and eventually everybody sort of runs out of willpower and gives in at the end of the day or whatever.
Yep. I went back to full everything. I went back to regular soda because I don't drink that much. I went back to mayonnaise, forget the low fat, nothing, no low fat anything, because I just do less of the good stuff. I got all the satisfaction from it, and I just move along. I don't have time for this nonsense.
But I think that's one of the arguments too. One of the concerns is people are getting bombarded with so many guidelines and recommendations. And the question is, maybe we need to make them simpler. Don't smoke. Be physically active, whether it's structured exercise or just building it into your day. Drink moderately or not at all. Stay engaged in life. And try to eat a reasonably healthy diet, but you don't really have to become a nut about any of these things.
We'll talk about that, comparing some low-fat diets and the different diets, the branded diets, the different kinds. And we do have to talk about a fairer triathlon, because that's an interesting concept. Maybe I could do a triathlon if it was a little fairer. Maybe it could happen. We'll find out.
It has the word fair in it, and you're willing to discuss it?
Because I kind of like the way this sounds when I'm reading ahead on the Human Limits blog. We'll talk more with Dr. Mike Joyner when we return.
Nothing's fair.
KROC-AM. News Talk 1340, KROC-AM. This is Rochester Today with Tracy McCray and Andy Brownell, and Dr. Mike Joyner is here discussing different topics from his Human Limits blog. And during the news, we were talking about the boss,
Bruce Springsteen. And before we started this morning, Andy and I were talking about the troubles in the NFL, which we don't need to go into. But I think Bruce Springsteen and Derek Jeter both show it's possible to be rich, famous, get way too much attention, and still keep your nose clean and focused on what you do best, and to just both of them relentlessly pursue this vision that they have and this excellence that they've achieved. And to see, if you've ever been to one of Bruce Springsteen's concerts, it's incredible. And if you just watch the videos,
he never stands still.
Yeah, here's a 65-year-old man who gives it all he's got. And the other really interesting thing about it, we were talking again about this tremendous documentary, 20 Feet from Stardom, about all the backup singers. And they interview him in this documentary, and it's just how interested he is in his art. How interested he is in it, and how committed he is. And he really stays in shape. I think he runs about 4 miles every other day and then lifts other days. And if you go to various sites on the Internet, there'll be Bruce Springsteen sightings at various 24-hour fitness places all over the world.
Oh, that's funny.
People will be, I was in after work at 4 a.m. and I saw Bruce Springsteen in
that's funny.
24-hour fitness in Portland or Seattle or wherever it is. So
he has a membership. You can go to any of their clubs.
Yeah, and I think just other gyms. So I think he and again, Jeter is also equally amazing for those reasons.
And Jeter is, how he survived New York with Yeah, he's in the pressure cooker of the world.
But he's a health club guy. He is hooked in with one of the health clubs in New York, because when we were there, there was Derek Jeter
pictures,
mannequins and photos and stuff that with one of the national chains, he's hooked in with them. And any of those locations in New York, he was there.
But, it can go back to mental status. And, and the key to perhaps your physical health is that mental status.
Staying focused on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, you've talked about being in the zone, and Jeter, to survive what he did in New York City. And
20-year zone.
Yeah, and he had a flamboyant personal life, but he managed to stay out of the tabloids because he basically said, "This is who I am. I'm going to do what I'm going to do,"
and didn't do outrageous stuff.
Right? He didn't He never.
He grew up. He was young. He did some dumb stuff, but he grew up.
And I think the other thing, though, too, is it shows what happens when people focus on the fundamentals. Jeter and Bruce Springsteen, and take care of themselves physically. They're able to perform at very, very high levels for prolonged periods of time. In Jeter's case, probably 5 or 6 years longer than the average ball player. And in Bruce Springsteen, I mean, for a person like Bruce Springsteen to have survived the 60s and 70s when so many of his contemporaries got into all sorts of interesting substances.
Then how do we explain Keith Richards?
Right.
How he must be the anomaly.
The deal with the devil.
He's the anomaly.
Well, think how much better off he'd be if he hadn't.
Oh, my gosh, it's amazing. All right, let's talk about the fairer triathlon, because it's probably not what it sounds like it is. But who's Jens Voigt, first of all?
Jens Voigt is a 43-year-old man who is a superb cyclist, participated in about 15 or 20 Tour de France races, and always finished well, never won, and was kind of a fan favorite. And he got done with the tours this summer in Europe and said he was going to try to break the hour record on a velodrome or on the track.
Sure.
There's a long history about people trying to see how far they can cycle in an hour. He went and did it, went 51 kilometers and change last week, which is incredible, and then retired for good. And as I thought about this, so Voigt did this in an hour.
51 kilometers an hour. Wow. That's fast.
The top runners can go about 13 kilometers in an hour, and the top swimmers can go about 6K in an hour. And these are not frequently contested events, but I started thinking about it. And if you look at the triathlon, which is the Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and a marathon at the end, 26-mile marathon, which takes a lot of time, but about 50% of the total duration or more is spent on the bike. So, and only less than an hour swimming for the top guys and 3 hours running. Mm-hmm. So you wonder what would happen if you had an event that had an hour of each, would take about an hour for the top swimmers, an hour for the top cyclists, an hour for the top runners. So it was more temporally fair in that regard.
It'd be time more than distance. So you just go as long and as fast as you can for 1 hour.
Right.
It's a different concept.
And get a point scale like you have in the decathlon or something like that. The other way you could do it, Tracy, is just pick distances that would take a top person that long. For example, you could do something like a 2-mile swim an 8-mile run and a 20-mile ride would be the rough ratios that would maybe equalize it a bit.
You might be able to get a television audience.
Yeah, well, and actually, Alex Hutchinson, who writes the Sweat Science, a tremendous blog for Runner's World, Alex said that some people that are interested in televising things want to kind of have a short course one like they're doing with the sprint skiing, cross-country skiing. And there's discussion about sprint rowing as well, where you would have maybe a 500-meter or an 800-meter swim, and then you'd have some very brief couple-mile run and some very brief cycle. So it would maybe take about an hour.
Yeah.
You've done triathlons. Do you like the sound of that?
It'd be intense.
It would certainly be intense. I would certainly be interested in it because you wouldn't have to quite train as much. And then, the other thing though is that with all of these cable channels and ESPN and the ESPN 2, 3, 8, 12, Fox Sports, all these other competitors to ESPN that are emerging, everybody's looking for live programming, and if they could package something in an hour, they could put it on between beach volleyball and
ESPN, the Ocho.
Beach volleyball and bowling or something.
A 3-part miniseries
Right.
is what it would be, 3 hours. We're speaking with Dr. Mike Joyner about his Human Limits blog. We'll take a quick break, return, and look at that weather eye forecast. KROC-AM.
KROC-AM.
For Mystic Lake Casino, the Men of American Storm are coming to Mystic Lake on November 7th. America's hottest meal review is sure to leave you wanting more, guys. Well, maybe not. Get your tickets now at mysticlake.com. They're in good shape. Cloudy today, 67 with some isolated showers, a chance of scattered showers early this evening, and then overcast, 57. Tomorrow, partly sunny, 75. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, partly sunny, partly cloudy, depending on how you want to call it, and highs in the upper 70s. Nice. It's 61 degrees downtown at KROC-AM. Dr. Mike Joyner is here. We're talking about different health-related and sports-related topics, including something you had said about the low-fat diets. There was a comparison of all of these different diets?
Right. In early September, 2 things came out. Tracy, one was a study that compared putting people on a very low-carb diet versus more traditional dietary advice. And this study reported over the course of 6 months or a year that people lost more weight on the low-carb diet. About the same time, in another journal, people did an analysis of all the results from diets that had used specific brands, whether it was Atkins, Ornish, all the different name brands of diet books you read, and compared all the results of those types of diets and concluded that there was no better diet. Mm-hmm. And when you look at this over time, people get confused and they say, the doctors can't make up their minds, so on and so forth. But most of these interventions are pretty short and they're somewhat artificial because ultimately people have to stop being part of the study and go out and live their lives. And what's really interesting about all of this is that if you go and look at all these studies, the big issue is not whether one diet's better than the other. The big issue is whether people are compliant or not, whether they can adhere to the diet. So for some people, low carb may be better for their adherence. For other people, low fat might be better for their adherence, so forth and so on.
I just read something about, what's it called? The girlfriend diet or the friend's diet or something like that. And the idea behind that is that you have a running buddy, that you've got somebody that you're accountable to.
Right.
And that has to be, for me anyway, when I have a date to go and exercise, or
right.
I've got this running group that I run with in the mornings, if not for them, I would never get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to go running.
The term diet, is that part of the problem? I mean, we've taken the term
right.
and made it into a negative.
Well, I think a couple of things. Let's take these one at a time. Andy, first is Tracy, there's a ton of research coming out on what's called social contagion theory, where you look at kind of 6 degrees of separation. So it turns out if one of your friends is obese, your best friend is obese, you have about a 50% increased risk of being obese, so on down the line.
Wow.
And same for smoking, but also true for positive behaviors. And some people think that might just be a marker of like people hanging out together.
Sure.
On the other hand, some people think that there are sort of micro opinion leaders. And if you can convince a person in a social network to lose weight, stop smoking, do some positive behavior, it'll just kind of ripple through the social network.
I've got the conch.
Right. Well, and you see that, Andy, the advertisers understand that as they go to more narrow casting to really target specific audiences and specific individuals in those audiences to get them to do certain behaviors. And if you can do it in a positive way, that's great. But when you come to diet, Andy, I think you've just hit the nail on the head. I think there's sort of kind of a healthy eating movement out there, which is, get the junk food out, eat real food, eat less of it, and don't necessarily focus on any kind of magic bullet or silver bullet approach. And I think that's starting to show some results as well. And I think for both of these, what's interesting is there's this incredible website called the National Weight Control Registry. So Dr. Jim Hill out at the University of Colorado has collected survey research on literally, I think he's up to over 10,000 people who've lost a lot of weight and kept it off for several years. And he's found that the people who've lost, I think, up between about 30 and about a couple hundred pounds and really kept it off, he's found they do 5 or 6 simple things. They weigh themselves regularly. They all 90% exercise about an hour a day. Most are on a low-fat, low-calorie diet. They plan for Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's by either eating a little less beforehand, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And they have some sort of built-in accountability mechanism like you're talking about, Tracy. So what's really interesting is just 5 or 6 fundamental things that these individuals do. And they all do them.
Mm-hmm. But in other words, they're conscious of this activity all of the time.
Right.
They're never letting it be something in the background. It's always something in the forefront.
Well, and if you look at people that really have to change your behavior a lot, Andy, you really have to re-engineer your life.
Yeah.
You talk to people who've overcome drinking problems or substance abuse problems, they re-engineer their lives. And I think that's true for a lot of people dealing with kind of chronic social, medical, or other challenges. I think it's up to the rest of us to understand the extent to which that has to happen for people to make some of these positive changes.
I got a funny story about the diet business.
Okay.
My daughter, adult daughter, she's part of the healthy food movement.
Right.
She goes out of her way to buy fresh ingredients, and she makes delicious dishes, by the way, just awesome stuff. And she is, I guess you could classify her as a vegetarian. And we went out to dinner one night and took her out to dinner, and we sat down, and she ordered the batter-fried cod. And I looked at her like,
what?
Have you been substituted with an alien, or what's going on here? And she goes, I just got to have some. That's it. And it was so funny. And she
when
just
it's
took
not
that,
your normal deal.
Yeah, and she sat there. And I thought, it's batter fried cod. What's the big deal? But she thought it was the best thing in the world, just for that one little break. And I thought it was just an interesting thing that it was like, I'm letting my guard down just for a second.
But again, you can afford to do that if you've got at a good steady state or a good baseline.
So your blog is the Human Limits blog, and I was just looking, saying because you had written about the obesity epidemic or an inactivity epidemic, and I think that is we touched on that earlier in the hour, but that really is part of the bigger problem, is that it is, in addition to our food being different now than it was 30 years ago, our inactivity, ability to be inactive is much higher than it was 30 years ago. So those two have to go together.
And you amplify it. So the thing is for any time anybody sees this diet's going to solve the problem, this exercise plan is going to solve the problem, X, Y, or Z, don't believe it. It's going to be a multifactorial, multi-pronged approach. It's a little bit like the anti-smoking stuff. We helped educate people so fewer people smoked. There were restrictions on who could buy tobacco. We went to anti-smoking or non-smoking work environments. 5 or 6 or 10 things happened to help solve the smoking problem. And I know Dr. Hurt would tell you it's not solved, but they made a dent.
Sure.
And the same with traffic safety. I mean, cars are much safer. It's much safer to drive than it used to be. And that didn't happen only because of defensive driving. It happened for a lot of other reasons as well.
We're both going to get in trouble if we don't, for at least just a moment, mention the Rochester Fayed.
Right.
Because that's kind of what we do together.
10:30 Saturday mornings, Soldiers Field. Rain, shine, sleet, snow.
And explain how it all got started.
What was the coldest day you went out there last winter? Because there were plenty of cold days.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever the coldest Saturday was.
Every Saturday. There was one time when there was...
Did you bail out at least once?
Mike and me? Nope. There really isn't.
No. And Andy, the key thing, and this proves I've lived in Minnesota too long, 27 plus years, is you actually look forward to being colder and clearer than 20 and cloudy.
Yeah,
because it's a nice sunny day. We're out there,
and there's no wind, and you're all right.
Or you get behind some trees, and we were out there kind of snuck onto Soldiers Field Golf Course.
Yeah, we hid behind that well house there.
Right, and if you're bundled up, you actually got pretty warm in the sun. You're sort of like turtles in the sun.
But why? How did it all get started?
Well, I went and gave a presentation at a wellness meeting at the University of Kansas Medical City in Kansas City. And there's a guy, I'm blocking his last name, but it's Red Dog's Dog Days, and who set up a kind of a free calisthenics program kind of on the campus of the University of Kansas 20, 30 years ago, and they get hundreds or thousands of people. And ours is more modest. We've had up to maybe 25 or 30. But we have 5 or 10 regulars, and I figured while everybody's talking about the physical inactivity epidemic, including me, we might as well
do something about it.
You don't need a lot of equipment. You don't need this. I mean, everybody can do push-ups. Everybody can do dips on a chair. People can do jumping jacks, burpees, you name it. There's something that everybody can do to try to be a little bit more physically active.
Played with frisbees one time. Throw the frisbee, chase it. Do 10 push-ups, then get up, throw it, chase it.
Yeah.
It's very funny to watch, I'm sure.
Right.
But it is all ages and all strengths.
Right. And the key there, too, is nobody said adults can't play.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. When did that become illegal?
It's true.
Somebody said, how do I get my teenagers? Somebody sent me a note, Gretchen Reynolds from the New York Times, what do I do to get the teenagers more active this summer? I said, has anybody ever heard of water fights?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
laser tag. My son is 9, and he loves laser tag. And when mom straps on the laser tag, it's so funny.
Water fights, squirt guns.
I'm still fast. I can still catch them.
Oh, yeah. Back again to the good old days.
Right. Simple toys. I mean, a lot of them had a lot of merit to them.
If you want something to chew on, some interesting topics to look at, the Human Limits blog written by Dr. Mike Joyner. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you at Phi Ed on Saturday mornings at 10:30 at Soldiers Field. Everyone is welcome.
Yes, indeed.
We'll see you there. All right, thanks, Mike.